what are you looking for in a coach? And it's like, well, we want somebody that can take us to the playoffs. And it's like, yeah, no. What does that actually mean? I don't think this guy has any kind of clue.
If I'm UCLA, I call Bob Myers. He's a basketball person, and you give him whatever power he wants. I don't think he'd want it, but I know he loves that school. I'm giving you that one right now, though. He loves UCLA, has always been a part of UCLA. He's part of the Washington Commanders organization. Blazing hot in San Francisco Bay Area, Dylan. I imagine it is nice and cool and nice breeze coming off you when you're that house of yours. I'm sure you're on the beach, Malibu somewhere. Right next to Nicholson and Sean Penn and all that.
Yeah, I'm not near the water, man. It's hot here too. I'm sure it's worse here.
It's Dylan is in the heat. All good. We're recording this on a Tuesday morning. Things are going on everywhere. We have WNBA playoffs. We have NFL going. We have obviously the pennant race stuff. But guess what we're going to start with? It's Dylan's own alma mater. I'm sure they're very proud of that. That's like one of the main things they can be proud of these days. Dylan Hernandez's degree from UCLA. They just fired DeShaun Foster. Everyone could see it happening. It was not a competent regime. It was not a good hiring. Martin Jarmond, the AD, talked to reporters yesterday. Didn't sound like he had a lot of answers there. A lot of questions about Chip Kelly from the coach before that. Dylan, you're one of the highest powered alums in UCLA history. What's going to go on with the football coach there? How do you see this happening, and who do you see them kind of focusing on for the next coach?
Yeah, I think, well, the first thing is like, who's going to make this call, right? The press release that the school sent out, there was kind of something about kind of putting a committee together. When they hired Chip Kelly, it was kind of Casey Wasserman. I think Troy Aikman was kind of part of this small group that kind of led that search. My guess is that group will reconvene because you just can't let Jarmond handle this, right? I mean, he fucked up the Chip Kelly thing first by not firing him. Then, Chip Kelly leaves late in the offseason, which kind of put them in this situation where, and then he for some reason said, hey, I'll have a coach hired in 4 days. Hires DeShaun Foster, kind of puts himself in that deadline, hires DeShaun Foster. He signed off on, kind of paying Cal, the breakup $10 million a year or whatever, which kind of, I think drained him a bit.
Well, that isn't on him, I don't think. That's on the ridiculous decision to go with USC, and you kind of had to pay. Anyway, go ahead. Keep going.
Anyway, but yeah, I think so. That's kind of the first thing is like, who's going to be kind of part of this group? I think when you look at this now, here's kind of the problem, right? Is I think they've played around, in recent years with different types of hires, right? They had Mora here, right? They went with something a little more high profile with Chip Kelly. They tried kind of the new guy in DeShaun Foster. None of this has worked. And I think kind of the biggest thing that's problematic for the school is just how empty the Rose Bowl is, right? Mm-hmm. Every year it just kind of feels there's this lack of enthusiasm. And, those parking lots right outside the Rose Bowl there, right? There was a time my kid had soccer practice out there, mm-hmm. right? And you could have 3-4 teams out there practicing where people used to tailgate now, right? Mm-hmm. There's a bunch of open space there now. And I think that's the biggest issue. It's just that there's this complete lack of enthusiasm right now. And, I don't think they can just kind of go and make a safe hire, just like we don't want to get embarrassed hire, because that's not going to move the needle right now, right? In LA, once you lose the city's interest, it's hard to get that back. What they're going to have to do is really kind of hit a home run on this one in terms of finding a Sean McVay type of guy, right? Who, you beat everybody to him, somebody with, obviously in McVay's case, he came from a very strong coaching tree, mm-hmm. had very solid ideas of what he wanted to do, and went about and implemented that right away. And obviously then it kind of comes down to, okay, well, who's asking when they interview these candidates, who's asking these questions? I think what was most troubling about Martin Jarmond's, teleconference, right, with the reporters the other day was just kind of the lack of specificity, right? Yep. What are you looking for in a coach? And it's like, well, we want somebody that can take us to the playoffs. And it's like, yeah, no shit, right? But what does that actually mean? I don't think this guy has any kind of clue, and I think, he seems like a pleasant guy, and we all kind of know, right, middle managers kind of like this, that are, right, they're good with the politics and stuff. They know how to shake the right hands. But when it actually comes to the specifics of kind of doing the nitty gritty of whatever the job is, they just kind of don't know what to do. And Jarmond kind of seems to fit that category. So I think the first thing is kind of line up, okay, who's going to be kind of asking these questions? and then kind of going again, finding somebody. The one good thing about this Foster thing was, the buyout wasn't some kind of ridiculous Lincoln Riley situation, right?
Yeah.
Where, if this thing goes south with USC, they are stuck with them. They cannot afford to buy him out. That's not the case here. And I think UCLA has to, at all costs, kind of maintain that flexibility, because you know what? A guy could look great on paper. It might just not work out, right? And in that case, you have to be able to hit eject if you're a school like UCLA. Obviously kind of the obvious candidate is a guy just across town, one guy that was in their program just a couple of years ago, Danton Lynn. Seems kind of like an obvious thing. Now, I'm not sure if he wants the job, right? Because the way he's getting talked about, it does feel like it's either a matter of time that he makes a jump to the NFL or that he get a head coaching job. And do you kind of want to walk into this mess? I'm not so sure about that. I don't think, necessarily if they offer it to him that he would even take it. But yeah, I think that they got their work cut out for him here, because this is, on one hand, like, sure, it's LA, they got a new nice practice facility that Casey Wasserman built them a few years back. But this is also kind of a very big challenge. And this is a reputation ruiner potentially for you.
Yeah, it might already be partially ruined anyway. It's kind of reviver. It's reputation. You got to revive the reputation. I think they need a general manager. I think Stanford, for different reasons, was in somewhere like nobody cared about the program. Still nobody cares about the program. But it's interesting now because they brought Andrew Luck in to run the football program, essentially above and beyond the athletic director. Like he's just kind of on a separate thing, reporting to the president. I think UCLA, other schools are doing this. We obviously Cal, Ron Rivera. There's many other schools that are kind of going this way. You kind of, you go for the glamour there. You give that person that slight AD power, and then you let them run the football program and the NIL and all those business related things that a broad-minded person. If I'm UCLA, I call Bob Myers. I know he's a basketball person, and you give him whatever power he wants. I don't think he'd want it, but I know he loves that school. I'm giving you that one right now, though. He loves UCLA, has always been a part of UCLA. He's part of the Washington Commanders organization. You say, Bob, what will it take to get you here? And you want to run the basketball and football, it's yours. If Martin Jarmond doesn't like it, he can quit. That's what I would do. Number one. Football coaching wise, I think Myers would have some connections, or other people. You need to go that way, not have Martin Jarmond do it, because we've seen what he's done lately. And Danton Lynn is obviously an up and comer. Maybe he sold on if you tie him with a general manager, and you still might lose him. But you know what? You hire a good coach, sometimes you're going to lose him. He might want the Washington job or something like that. But then you know what? I call Jed Fish, who's the Washington coach right now, who was the UCLA interim coach, who was their best coach of the last 15, 20 years, as I went back and looked. I got some shots from Mora defenders, by the way, when I said that. They have not hired anybody significant, and they had one for Jed Fish as the interim coach, and people didn't like that. Mora had a couple good seasons, but it filtered out. If he was a great coach, he'd be coaching right now, by the way. Right. He's still a pretty young man. He's not. There's a reason for this. No shots trying to be taken at Jim Mora Jr. Sorry about that, Jim. They call it alignment. They call it whatever Sabian calls it, having the president, the AD/GM, the coach all together in this. That's how you get, attention from good young coaches, good up and coming coaches, the kind of coach that you're going to probably need to turn this thing around. Probably, I always like throwing out like home run names or wild names. I'm sure there are UCLA fans are saying the name John Gruden. I would not go that way, but I'm sure they're saying it. I don't know that he's got the energy or the wherewithal, and there's some bad emails out there with him. Jimbo Fisher is another name that's coming up more for other kind of East Coast programs. Kind of like that's really the poor man's Lincoln Riley, because you bring him out there and then what? What if it fails? And then where are you with him? But I think you can make, if you can get a general manager who really believes in Jimbo Fisher, I wouldn't be against that, because he's won a national championship. Beyond that, I don't know. You want to identify the next thing. They haven't done that, as you said, since Terry Donahue, right? I mean, when you really latched onto somebody you knew was rising up, and you stay with that guy. Different era, probably 4 different eras ago, but that's what I think they should do. And whoever that name is, if it's Lynn, it's Lynn. There's some other guys out there. There's some, I mentioned Jed Fish. There's some offensive coordinators out there. I think you probably want an offense, probably want to score, but don't do what they did recently, generally. And I think you do that whether it's Bob Myers or not, it's a Bob Myers type figure, Andrew Luck type figure, just has that total credibility that kind of makes somebody take the call. If Andrew Luck's calling you, because he's searching for a coach too, by the way, because this Frank Reich is an interim, although they keep winning, then maybe it'll be Frank Reich permanently. You're taking the Andrew Luck's call. Even if you don't really want the job, you're taking the call. That's what they need. I'm not sure you're taking Martin Jarmond. Maybe you are, because he might throw you some easy money, but that's not exactly the guy who's going to change the tenor of this, I would say. You got any home run names, any home run calls that you would just, hey, it's going to be partly your money because you're one of the big hitting alums. So I'm sure they're going to go, Dylan, we need an extra $2 million. So can you just forward your donations a little bit here?
I mean, my pick would be like somebody ideally that like I have never heard of. That you get somebody that like is again right that's kind of again out. I think McVay is kind of the perfect kind of example of what you want right now. We've also seen these things kind of go wrong, right? I mean, the Chargers responded kind of to the McVay thing by hiring away his defensive coordinator. It turned out to be Brandon Staley, and they thought, okay, hey, we're going to be ahead of the curve here, and sometimes it just doesn't work. But again, you get somebody that's kind of early enough in their coaching career, you won't get like completely hamstrung by buying out his contract. And I think that they need to at least maintain, again, kind of that flexibility while kind of looking for that next thing, whatever it is.
UCLA. Let's just keep talking UCLA. My God, this is awesome. We're not talking Stanford, who's got an interim coach, and Andrew Luck is GM. We're talking UCLA.